to have you on the show, mate. You come
My pleasure,
highly
man.
recommended from people that I really respect in the health world. First heard you on Paul Check's podcast, and then having spoken to a friend, Mike about you, heard you on his, really good. And, having had lots of clients who want to go through the natural birthing process.
Yeah.
Lots of clients who couldn't get pregnant and have gone through that. Lots of clients who, who are in the natural world, who are having their first baby and get the fear of God put into them by the mainstream. It's great to have someone like you on who can cut through all these, all the minutiae, all the myths, all the nonsense. And
right.
Welcome to the show, mate.
Thanks, man. It's really great to be here. You mentioned a couple of my favorite people. Paul Check, as you're aware, I was on call, didn't even really know the Check thing, and I happened to be in the right place at the right time and got to know them really well. I consider Paul and Angie and Penny very near and dear friends. I visit them as frequently as I can. And then you brought up Mike Salemi, who, of all of the men I've met in my life, Mike might be the most well-rounded, heart-centered man, but simultaneously one of the strongest, toughest guys I've ever met. He's kind of in that category of like Kyle Kingsbury for me, where it's like, I don't know how you managed to find your way into my life, but I'm so grateful for it. And Ryan, knowing the little bit I know about you, I could see us becoming good bros going forward too.
It's one of those things, right? It's when you get put into the world of those people. Me and Mike come across each other just from years of I've been in the natural health world. It's a big world, but it's a small world as well, and the quality always seems to rise to the top, and people get to know each other. And there's people that I trust implicitly with stuff, and people that have done the work and that just want the truth. And it's generally when you connect with them, it's easy. I popped round to see Mike. I think it was in September, and I walked in the door, and before we'd known it, an hour and a half had passed, and we hadn't even gone. I was mate, so we should have left this for the podcast. Oh my God, yeah, we should have. But Mike's one of the best. So Nathan, just for people out there, I know you probably told us a million times, but just because this is the first time on the show, I just wanted you to just give, even if you just want to do like a brief introduction of who you are, what you do, and why you got into doing what you do.
Yeah, I think most people who go into medicine, they do it because they're good at tests, they want to help people. I think I went into medicine because I was afraid I wasn't going to be valuable to society. And I thought maybe having that MD, medical doctor credential, would make my life a lot easier. Like, I don't have to worry about finances. I don't have to worry about having a job. I'm going to be revered. People are going to respect me, whatever. It's all those insecurities that boil up. And then when you actually go through that process, you might find yourself happy. Most doctors are not happy because they're not well respected, because they haven't done a lot of the homework that is required to really truly care for a person. And they know that they have limitations, but they have never been incentivized to round themselves out a little bit. So when I found myself in that position, as a little tiny side story, my last job within the conventional medical model, I was fired from because I took my mask down while caring for a person who's dying at the end of life. I've got 2 board certifications, meaning I've done even more training than most doctors. I'm an OBGYN, and I'm a board-certified hospice and palliative care doctor. And the 2 actually go hand in hand, but I won't get into that in this conversation. But I was caring for a man who's at the end of his life. He wanted me to take my mask off. He hadn't had any family, hadn't any physical touch, and he's going to die. This is undignified. He's got 95 years before him. And I said, okay, I'll take my mask off. I don't care. We're not even going to get into the COVID thing, because I'm sure most of your audience feels that this would be a pretty unjust thing to do for somebody who spent their entire life training to get there, invested their entire, I'm still indebted by about $500,000 US dollars for my medical education. To sacrifice that much and then to be fired for something that is so insanely ridiculous. It was like, okay, that was the nudge I really needed. Paul Check actually gave me the initial nudge, like, you should do your own thing. I got fired and I never looked back. It was like, I got to build my own thing. It's time. and that took a lot of, it was very scary. It was very scary because I didn't have any system that was looking after me, but I knew what I knew. I knew what worked, and I was curious to figure out what else I could bring into my practice to make the lives of women, their partners, their babies, their fertility journey, to make it as smooth as possible. So that's what I get to do now, and I fucking love it. I have a great life right now.
When you met Paul, you were still in the system?
Yeah, so I met him. I got a random phone call from Angie, who her last name was Czech, but I didn't have any connection to the family yet. She had called and said I was going to have a home birth, but I used to be in this practice, and it was the practice I was on call for. The doctor was traveling around on vacation in the Mediterranean, and she said she wants me to go to the hospital. I don't have a doctor. You're the best I've got. Can you meet me there? And so even there, I don't know if my medical malpractice insurance would cover this. I have no idea. But here's a person who was going, she's at like 37, 38 weeks, is about to have a baby at home, and now is being forced to pivot 180 degrees to have a hospital experience, which she was determined not to have because the first birth, her first baby, it did not go as well as she was hoping. So, so I got this call, I met him, and Paul's in there and their midwife is in there. I just got to chatting with him. I was sitting on a Swiss ball and we were making jokes, and I was watching her blood pressures, and her blood pressures were slowly coming down. And so I was like, okay, here's the scenario. We ended up taking action, and after 3 days of labor, she ended up ultimately having a C-section despite everything we tried to do. That baby was determined to come out through the abdomen. So interestingly, they were just blowing smoke. You know, they were like, it was the best surgery we've ever experienced. There was no pain medications needed afterwards. The incision was more cleanly sutured than any incision Paul had seen. He was saying those types of things. And he said, do you want to come to my office in order to, I just want to like appreciate you a little bit. And he blew me some bags of tobacco. We painted, we stacked big rocks. He took me on a medicine journey, and he sang to me. He just was loving on me for a whole day. And I gained an appreciation for just how impactful that type of care can be for a person who's afraid to be in the hospital. And I don't know if she was afraid necessarily, but it certainly wasn't her preference.
Yeah.
So while we were stacking rocks in his rock garden, he said, you know, you do things pretty differently. Let me help you, branch out and build your own thing. And I was like, yeah, okay, whatever. I still had all of this med school debt. And when you're a doctor, you're trained to do one thing. You're trained to work in a hospital system. Like, that's what you're trained to do. So for me to pull out of that it was a little scary. But from like the essentialist point of view, I was spending way too much time documenting. I was spending way too much time practicing what we call defensive medicine, meaning doing things that aren't right, but just trying to save my ass in case something bad were to happen. It was very paternalistic. There wasn't enough time for me to really get to know people. So in the end, it was a really, really healthy transition where I could be happy as a doctor again. But had I continued on that path, I may have been suicidal. I mean, it's such a shitty way to be, working in a hospital system for somebody like me who's ultra curious and very, very right brain, very creative and very thoughtful. And I really like getting to know people. So he prompted me, and then it wasn't until, a couple years later, I started putting the pieces together, and then bam, I got fired, and I was like, it's time to go. Like, it's now or never. And I just took the plunge, and here we are.
That was the universe giving you the sign you needed.
Yeah, it's like a swift kick in the ass.
yeah, right. I've tried to do it nicely. Now we need to get you moving. But
yeah,
I always say this to people when it comes to, it's just like hospitals. It's crazy to me how they're based on health, right? So I always say to people, the one place but burns, cuts, broken bones, fantastic, right? But I always say, where wouldn't I go if I wanted to heal from a chronic issue or something like that? And it would be a hospital. I'd want to be somewhere where the air was fresh, the sun was shining, the food was fresh, or even say strip it back and go, when you walk into a spa and you're about to get a massage, the essential oils, the music's nice, there's lots of plants. You walk into a hospital and it's just clinical, and it literally screams the opposite of health. It's somewhere you don't want to be. And so for me, it's no surprise someone like yourself didn't really feel, at home in that setting, because, I mean, even just based on what you've got in the background here, your red light, you can see the diffuser in the background. It's not it's not. It's like that's more conducive to health. So,
Yeah.
I mean, so you branching out. Probably one of the best things you're doing. You'll touch many more. I mean, it's just from Paul and other people in our industry who have got like an audience. You know, I'm sure you're in high demand. I've seen you on some pretty high-profile podcasts, and hopefully you can teach more people to do what you do. Because for people out there, the difference between, would you say you're a holistic gynecologist? Would you say that?
Yeah.
So,
I got the shirt on right here. Holism.
Holism, right? Got you. So, for you. Compared to a normal gynecologist and a holistic gynecologist, what would be the difference for people out there? What would your approach be compared to the conventional approach?
Well, I think a lot of people, it's a great question, Ryan, and I'm glad you're asking because not enough people ask that. They all want to talk about the birth, but we also got to get pregnant first. And I think of all of the facets of allopathic or Western medicine, of all of the things that we're not doing well, and you mentioned a lot of reasons why you would want to go to an emergency room, like you got hit by a car, you cut off your finger with a table saw. There's a lot of good reasons to have surgeons and intensivists and whatnot. Having said that, let's look at fertility alone. So within gynecology, a big part of that is helping people manage menstrual periods, menstrual cramping, all of the women's health stuff outside of pregnancy and childbirth and postpartum is the realm of gynecology. The typical lifespan of a young woman in the United States is that she reaches an age where she's starting to get curious about having sex. She's got, her menstrual periods are irregular. She goes to her doctor's office for the maybe first time about women's health issues, and they offer her right away contraception. Because number one, you don't want to get pregnant, do you? Which is fair. Like a lot of people don't want to be pregnant when they're 15. But birth control and other, the pill and other forms of contraception are being prescribed for far greater reasons than just not getting pregnant.
Yeah.
They're being provided for heavy periods, painful periods, you name it.
Acne.
So this life cycle is, okay, you've been started on birth control. Now you've been on birth control for, let's say, 10 years. You're 26. You come off of birth control, you've met the love of your life or whatever, and now you want to have a baby. The problem with this approach is that nobody ever asked, why are their periods abnormal? It's typical that they're abnormal when you're 15 or 16, but because you've had that whole decade of having your ovaries silenced, we don't know how your endocrine system works. And to boot, you've been on a pill which messes up your gut. It messes up your immune system, your endocrine system, and your nervous system. So now you've come off of the pill, and nobody ever looked upstream to determine. Yeah. So this person has been on birth control now for all these years. Now they want to get pregnant. They try. Nobody ever taught them about what's required for pregnancy to happen. All you know is that if sperm is shot up in there and there's an egg ready, you can get pregnant. That's the only thing we've ever been taught. So we've done a disservice to this woman by messing up her body with birth control. We have never looked upstream to figure out how is the thyroid working, how is the pituitary, the hypothalamus, the adrenals, how's all of that working? Here's the whole organism. And we haven't taught her anything about how pregnancy actually happens. So my approach to fertility, I actually just launched a program called the PRP Fertility Program, which is a truly holistic approach. We get into all of the physical. We get the adrenals back in order. We do a lot of functional lab testing. We want to see how is the whole body working, because fertility, having a baby, is the byproduct of all of these systems working well.
Yeah.
We go through all the lifestyle stuff. There's lots of books. They get access to my new Czech Institute Natural Fertility Program, and we work together for 60 days. I get them seeing a spiritual, like a psychic medium, a breath worker, Sarah Gustafson, who's also a high-level Czech practitioner. She sees them for metaphysical counseling. There's all these other practitioners. The reason I highlight this is that as an OBGYN with extensive experience in fertility, I don't have all of the tools to help people get pregnant when they end up hitting these fertility challenges. So a truly holistic approach not only takes into account functional labs and imaging and maybe some minor procedures or surgeries, it takes into account the mental, emotional, and spiritual aspects that are related and relevant to this incredibly sacred process of getting pregnant and ultimately having a baby.
100%. I mean, I've like yourself. I was actually on your website and looking at that. I wanted to have a chat with you about that program. Yeah. I've had it myself. Clients have come to me and I've done 3 rounds of IVF and spent £28,000 of dollars, and I'm like, look, you're trying to create life when everything's out of balance. We need to get you back into balance. Your body wants to procreate. That's why we're here on Earth. But unfortunately, everything you're doing with your diet, your lifestyle, your stress is meaning that it's not. So we have to strip it back and be like, especially women today with a term, I don't know if you're familiar with it, called rushing women syndrome. Where they're literally trying to be everything to everyone. The best mother, the best,
be every woman.
Yeah, be everything. And their system's not meant for that. They're meant to. We used to go out and hunt because we're disposable, and they're meant to be.
That's right.
We are disposable. We go to hunt, we go to war. And they're meant to have enough nutrition and resources to be able to create life. And most of them are running around, their endocrine systems all over the place, the hormones are all over the place, been taking birth control for 10 years. They're very, very toxic. They're super stressed. They're not getting enough sleep. And it's like, whoa, of course your body doesn't want to get pregnant. I mean, there's some people got super strong constitutions and they can get away with it, but it doesn't mean that they can have the healthiest baby going. That can lead to ill babies and the mother becoming ill after birth because that firstborn takes a lot of their life force energy.
Exactly right, Ryan.
Yeah, Paul's probably talked to you about this. When you study the native tribes, a lot of them wouldn't even let wouldn't let the man near a woman for 3 years after their pregnancy because they said it took 3 years to recover from that pregnancy. And so this is stuff that, I would love to actually go have a look at your program because, I've got my one that I do with people, but I reckon there'd be some absolute gems for yourself. Maybe have to book you in and pick your brain.
Can I piggyback on what you said about that? Because this IVF, in vitro fertilization, in the U.S. costs $12,000 to $15,000 on average. And they pump you full of synthetic hormones. They harvest eggs. They get the guy to jack off into a cup, put the egg and sperm together, and then implant the embryo. That whole procedure is quite expensive. So for a fraction of that cost, not only might you avoid that big bill, but IVF is an independent risk factor for a wide variety of pregnancy complications. What I do is not because I really am hell-bent on getting a person to live the HLC lifestyle through the Czech Institute. What I'm hell-bent on is taking radical responsibility for what happens to your body now before you get pregnant so that you can have as many options as to where you give birth, how you give birth, if you're going to be induced, are you going to need a C-section? Is your placenta going to be healthy? Is that baby going to grow well? When you are adequately nourished, you're moving well, you're hydrating well, you're sleeping well, your mindset's in order, all of those foundational principles, the pregnancy and the birth itself are far easier in the sense that you don't develop pregnancy complications. So IVF is an independent risk factor for many complications because, no surprise, we have forced the body to get pregnant despite the signal of fertility challenges being an indication that there is something going on upstream. It might be physical, mental, emotional, or spiritual that is telling you, hey, it's not time to have a baby. We got to get some of this stuff in order. Now, that's not to shame or blame anybody who does IVF, but even if you do get all of these lifestyle factors in order to the best of your resources, the likelihood of IVF working is higher. And if you do get pregnant with IVF, the risk of those complications drops dramatically. Because if your baby's going to grow to the best of its ability, regardless of, you could be eating McDonald's all day long, the baby will probably do okay. But the baby's going to take all of those valuable minerals, vitamins, and nutrients from your body, your nervous system, your endocrine system. It's going to steal it from your bones, your healthy muscle to sustain itself. And your body, your life force energy, I mean, there's many ways to look at this, is actually going to suffer. And now you're a parent and you're not going to be sleeping much and you're not going to have time to, maybe not have enough time to cook healthy meals. You got to get this dialed in way beforehand so that you have the most autonomy possible, you have the least likelihood of complications, and you actually survive this process and you're actually stronger and more, let's just say more whole after the birth as opposed to when you were trying to get pregnant.
Yeah, more vital. As you say, like by being healthy, by being healthier, everything improves. All the risk factors improve, and so, and as you probably know, like the firstborn baby from any mother gets majority of her toxins that have been building up. And so the healthier we can get mother beforehand and father before even you get pregnant, you're going to pass on healthier genes. And so this is something that people need to understand as well. And so, yeah, as you said, you're literally, nature's saying, look, you're not healthy enough to procreate. And you're saying, no, fuck it. I'm going to just try and like smash this peg through this hole.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, nature's saying no. And so, and we think we're above nature, but it's just because, as you said, and this is no slight to people that do it, because most don't know there's another way because they're not taught. Medical industry just says, oh, I mean, I say to people, 20, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, there wasn't fertility centres, now there's one on every corner in the US and in the UK. I mean, men just had to look at a woman and she'd fall pregnant,
Yeah.
Nowadays, it's not. And obviously, there's lots to do with that, like what's going on our food, what's in the water supply, stress, modern lifestyle, so many things that are going on. And so this is where, as you said, there about the mother having an easier pregnancy, less complications if they're healthier. So this is one of the things I wanted to ask, because, I put a post up, I think it was about a year ago, and it was like a giraffe. She was in the field and standing up, and 2 minutes later she gave birth, And I was like, whoa, I put on the thing, how did she manage that without all the midwives and without all the medication? And people were like laughing. And I said, and that's a giraffe, giving birth. So, do you think, I mean, I've seen it as well in native tribes. Women go in with their mother, they stand up, they give birth very easily. It's all part of the process. Like, how much has the society's message that childbirth's going to be stressful, it's going to be super painful,
great question,
worried, how much does that actually impact the mother and make it a stressful situation, rather than if she thought, well, it's something I've got to go through, but I'm sure it's not going to be a walk in the park, but it's not going to be life threatening, or it's not going to like ruin me. I think, how much do you reckon that impacts?
So, we were just getting onto the question, I think. So it's been cutting out. We've got some internet issues here, guys, but I'll piece it all together. So I'll just asking Nathan what he thinks about, the fact that society puts out or paints the picture that giving birth is going to be like this excruciatingly painful thing that women need to really, prepare for. How much do you reckon that impacts a woman and causes them stress that, otherwise wouldn't be there?
Yeah, I think that you're asking a great question, and to borrow a little bit from one of my mentors and this prolific author that you should know about, his name is Michel Audant. He's a general surgeon from Paris. He's like 90-some years old now. But one of his big advocacy points is we have spent the last 100 years studying the pregnancies that go wrong. In the meantime, there is a large number of pregnancies that go beautifully well. In fact, women used words like pleasurable, ecstatic to describe their experience. Why are we not studying those really, really great experiences, which, by the way, they outnumber the bad ones by a lot. Most bad outcomes are statistically low likelihood. But why not study those really good ones? So 2 very short stories. My wife and I, a little over a year ago, we gave birth in our bedroom, just across the way right here. And my wife gained maybe 20 pounds in her pregnancy. It was her second in a matter of like 2 years. And at like roughly it was on her due date, her guest date, as I call it, because you never know when a baby's going to come. Her waters opened around 5 p.m. We called our breathwork friend, Sarah Tremoli, who's fantastic for anybody out there who's looking to really get as close to the childbirth intensity as possible. Effigy breathwork gets you pretty darn close. We called her over. We started breathing at 6 p.m. By 6:46, the baby was out asleep on my wife's chest. Almost no pain. And in her words, it was very healing from her previous birth, which was in the hospital. There was no stitching. There was no issue whatsoever. In fact, she didn't even need a medical staff there. The baby would have just been fine on her chest. So that's one. That's 2-hour labor. I then was just up in Indiana for a home birth, which is just north of Kentucky, up by Chicago. And I moved up there because they had hired me for their whole prenatal care. And this couple was eating organ meats, eating bivalve shellfish, eating bone broth, They were getting all organic produce. They don't have a lot of money, but they prioritized all of their finances towards the healthiest lifestyle possible, and they were very happy and content. So they paid me very minimal because of their finances, but I thought it was like the ideal client. He was follows Paul Chek and all of his work, and she's definitely on board with all of that. They had a previous birth, which was a surprise breech baby at home. Perfect client. I went up on a Thursday. She had a baby on Saturday night, and I didn't even make it to the birth. It was so quick and so painless. Like, it was just, I'm in labor, and then 20 minutes later, baby's out. They didn't even get into the tub. They just were sitting on their living room floor. So I went there and I made a big pot of bone broth. I helped clean up some blood on the carpet. I checked the baby out, checked mom out. But really, it was just like, this is what birth could and perhaps should look like for most women. Instead, because we haven't dialed in our lifestyle and our nutrition and our movement patterns and our sleep and all of that beforehand, you end up with unnecessary complications, which, by the way, the U.S. is not doing so well. We have way more complications and interventions and inductions than most other developed countries. So then the big question is, to your point, does birth have to be hard, or have we portrayed it that way because we're only focusing on the bad? I'd say the latter. I'd say that there are so many women who are having home births in uncomplicated ways, and in their own environment, on their turf, being loved and cared for compassionately by somebody like me or a really wonderful midwife, and they don't need the hospital. But that is generally not portrayed in a positive light in the media, because we just love the idea that doctors are heroes, and what happens in the hospital is we've intervened, we've created now a cascade of other issues that lead to complications, and then we, with our surgical skills, are able to save the day. And then everybody says, hooray, OBGYNs, thank God. Well, you wouldn't even have been in that position had we dialed in your lifestyle and your nutrition to the best of your resources ability way before you even got pregnant. And that's my whole practice.
Yeah. I mean, you've done all the hard work prior to the pregnancy. So the body is
exactly
ready.
Right.
So it's like the athlete getting ready for the race. And then when the race comes, it takes care of itself because all the preparation has been done, rather than being like, oh shit, we haven't done any of this work. I'm just going to, go for it. And no wonder if you pull a muscle at the start line when your body's not prepared for it, I think that's quite a good analogy, really. I've just come up with that.
That's a perfect, I'm going to steal that one, actually. I'm going to steal that if that's okay.
steal away. And it's just because, it's the same with anything. If you put the preparation, you give your body, prepare it. You said before, you can even visualize the process. Oh, it's going to be, nice. And this is what a lot of they did in the tribes that I've studied, indigenous tribes and cultures. The mother would explain to her the process. They go in maybe with their mum and their nan, and it would be like maybe it said like an hour to 90-minute process at most. And they'd have certain smells. So I always say, like, where do you want to give birth? In a hospital or in your bedroom where you're comfortable. You can put your own smells in there. You may have like some and it's like the sounds and it's so you'll be so much more relaxed rather than being in a place where you don't really want to be. The energy is terrible. It's just most hospitals. They're not places of the places you want to leave as soon as possible.
As fast as possible.
So what you said there, it's so true. And that just goes to show. You said that you weren't even there in time. That's like you're like, well, I don't have to be because everything was done prior. And so my job was simple and
minimal.
Easy. Minimal. And so that, this is the thing, especially for women out there that are going through this or maybe they want to have a second child, and then down this route, or their first child. A lot of them are still worried, or what happens if, something goes wrong, or baby's born breech, for example. You probably think about this a million times, right? But just for my audience out there, are there, for example, is a baby being born breech, can it just be completely random, or is that generally the result of stress? And if it does happen, can you still give? I've spoken to women that say, you can still give birth like that naturally. But I was going to hear your thoughts on this.
Yeah. So a breech position, the butt or the feet are down, whereas the head should be down. The head, being the big bony thing that it is, makes way for the body usually. Yeah. The fear with a breech is that you've got this kind of soft jelly-like body. Yes, there's bones, but it's not as pliable as this big, bony thing that comes through first. So the fear is that the head's going to get stuck in the pelvis after the body has come out.
Right.
Now, the likelihood of that happening is way less, than it not happening. We don't really know now what the likelihood is, especially when you add on gestational diabetes and maybe poorly nourished tissues. Remember, the pelvis has to expand, and that requires adequate hydration with the right type of water, the right nutrients and electrolyte content. Your pelvis, with the work of somebody like Mike Salemi, we're putting a course together, by the way, on how to optimize the physical through physical movement and other lifestyle measures in pregnancy. But if your pelvis is flexible, the baby's head is not going to have a problem getting out of there. But if you look at the typical U.S. or even maybe Australian population, you're Australian, right?
I'm English.
Oh, you're English. I'm so sorry.
English. That's okay.
So
the Americans make that mistake a lot.
Yeah, I thought that we had a scheduling issue because of Australia, but it was a different podcast that I just was on, but I apologize.
Okay.
But I mean, anywhere in the Western world, people are not as healthy as they used to be. So if you're well nourished and you have adequate, great movement patterns, your adrenals are working well, you're going to have a normal physiologic birth, even if it's breech. So how did we get here with breech, where almost every single woman who has an OBGYN caring for them, who ends up with a baby that is butt down instead of head down, is going to be recommended C-section, without a doubt. All over the world, most women who have breech babies are still being recommended C-section. Now, there are some doctors and midwives who are offering the breech, a vaginal breech birth, but they're aging, they're starting to retire, and it's because we haven't taught residents, which are OBGYNs in specialty training, they haven't been teaching us the maneuvers to relieve little hiccups along the way. Just like with a head down baby, parts of the baby's body can get stuck. So you could get like an arm kind of tucked around the head, or maybe the neck is hyperextended and gets caught on the pubic bone. It's just like with a head down baby, there's maneuvers to help relieve that. The problem is, in roughly 2000, 2001, there was a big study that came out, multi-country, multi-center, many thousands of women, and they concluded, I'm using air quotes, definitively, that breech was not safe. So ever since that, we haven't taught anybody these maneuvers. So then a woman who has a breech baby, they can have a vaginal breech birth, which previously was not a big deal. But now the birth attendants, including midwives and OBGYNs, have no clue what to do with those dystocias. So a part of my platform is helping to reskill birth attendants on the basic maneuvers to relieve these things. Because if we can save them that first C-section and they have 5 kids later, they may end up with 6 C-sections. And the risk of mom or baby having issues in that surgery, as you add on multiple surgeries, it goes up. The placenta can grow into the previous uterine scar, requiring a hysterectomy at time of birth. The risk of blood loss, infection, all of those things go up in future pregnancies. Not to mention, with any C-section, it's very scary. It's an anxiety-producing event. You're strapped down crucifixion style, and there's all this commotion, and you can't see anything because there's a blue tarp in front of your face. It's not a very nice thing to have to go through. So it delays maternal neonatal bonding. A lot of women dissociate during that process. It's very traumatizing. We have to work through that later. So when you put all of that data together, we have to ask ourselves, what if we were teaching people to attend to breech birth and the dystocias? And the criticism is that the term breech trial that I mentioned definitively said it was unsafe, but they actually went back and looked at that data again. And there was all these issues. They included one baby that died. So they said that babies are more likely to die if they're born by vaginal breech than by C-section. So they were like, we don't want babies to die. Let's just do C-sections. The problem was that when they randomized all these women, a stillborn was not diagnosed before they randomized. They had some babies with structural, like congenital anomalies. They had twins that were included. They even had babies that were head down included. But this was supposed to be a breech study. So when you actually reanalyze the data, it was roughly a wash in these outcomes. It may have still favored C-section a little bit, but they weren't even including a lot of the other metrics that I described, the bonding, the trauma, etc. So we have to be very, very careful with how we use data to direct our practice, because with one study that was poorly done And by the way, they followed up with the babies that were born by this study, and they found 0 difference in long-term developmental outcomes 5 years after the term breach trial. So if we're gonna look at just one study and change our entire practice, now we're putting women at risk of harm if their baby is butt down, because we don't have the ability or the training to offer them a vaginal breach. And it was all because of this one stupid study. And I think I've said enough there. I'm curious what you think about that.
I think it just reminds me of the Ansel Keys study, just like
That's
where
a
he
great,
where he like went out and tried to prove that, you know, saturated fat was bad, and even though I think he had 28 countries that 28 countries that proved it wasn't, he cherry picked the 6 that proved it was, and then for like the next 30, 40 years, saturated fat was vilified, and you know, it's led to a whole cascade of health events, and now
we're
we've got
still struggling with that.
People are having canola and rapeseed oil and these like rancid vegetable and seed oils, and just on the base of one study that, you know, people avoiding saturated fat, which is so vital for everything when it comes to health, especially your sex hormones and your endocrine system.
Oh yeah.
And so, yeah, as you're saying there, I mean, it doesn't surprise me. Whenever like, those sort of things come up, what you're talking now, I was just thinking, that sounds like it's been done on purpose. Like, is in who benefits from that result? Do they get to hire out more surgical rooms? Does that mean they, you know, more nurses get paid more and doctors get paid more and surgeons get paid? It's like funny because every year the amount of surgeries increases by the amount of surgeons that are gone through qualifications, and so if everything looks like everything looks like a nail if you've only got a hammer.
Just whacking away at the screws, at the bolts, at everything else.
Well, it's just like, and the thing is like, and so the thing is like, if some people, if they have to have a C-section, you know, it's the thing. It's like, for me, it'd be like antibiotics. It would be like last resort, you know, life or death, or last resort, you know, life or death, but like last resort, because there's so many benefits to the vaginal birth, not to mention all the goodness that comes from, you know, from the vaginal canal, the probiotic,
That's right.
the probiotics, that gets to the vaginal canal. So if women do have a C-section, I always recommend getting things like, this is what I learned from Dr. Campbell McBride, I think it was, or maybe it's Donna Gates, but basically getting like milk kefir, or maybe walnut or coconut water kefir, and like literally putting it over the baby. They used to even do that, put like milk kefir vaginally before birth to even help with that. Is there anything?
Let me add to that. Better than kefir, you could put a sponge into the vagina.
Okay.
Take the sponge out and smear it all over the baby, in the eyes, the nose, the mouth, the neck, everywhere, and you're actually helping to colonize the baby in that way. This is really important. I remember having to, you know, sent to the principal's office because I was recommending this to the patients when I was in residency. And I was like, there's also data that supports this. And like, it's just logical. What they used to do actually is even for vaginal births, an old practice was to use iodine to clean out the vagina before babies came through.
What the hell?
Like the insanity of this stuff.
It's just like what are you doing? Like, you think that we're above nature? Here's the thing that I was just going to ask you there. Where's it gone? Where's it gone? What you just said there. Oh yeah. So when the baby comes out, it's covered. If it goes vaginally, it's covered literally, like it's almost like a white sort of coating, and they tend to get rid of that. Whereas in my research, that should be left, and it will seep into the baby's skin, and that once again is full of all the goodness, microbiota that it needs. Is that something you leave?
Vernix. Yeah, we used to joke when we were doing births and whatnot. If you got a bunch of vernix on you, you'd like just smear it in. Now we'd have gloves and everything on, but you knew that it was really good for the baby's skin. And yes, there's plenty of. I mean, it just came through a vagina. The vagina is not a clean place. It's dirty for all of the right reasons. You need, your microbiome to clean everything from your eyes, your mouth, your nose, to your vagina, to your anus. Like those bacteria are friends. They're truly. It's not just helpful; they are necessary for us to survive. So So this Vernix, that creamy white stuff, it is like the best skin lotion you could possibly imagine. For the baby, that's also a part of colonizing them with the microbiota of the mom, which probably has something to do with connecting and bonding with the mother. You know, you guys are in sync.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like Mother Nature knows what it's doing. You know, it's funny.
No, I don't know about that, man.
Yeah, I know. What we need to do instead is definitely recommend that mothers, that babies straight away after birth have precautionary antibiotics, because, you know,
heaven forbid.
It's just, I don't understand this. I've had one of my, well, he's my best friend. He's been like one of my since like I've been doing this work. He's one of my biggest champions when he went through this. You know, he was his first baby, but did everything. Beautiful baby, like no medication, like natural birth, but went in hospital. They were literally trying to shove antibiotics into the baby. We need to have precautionary antibiotics, and he was standing firm, and they were like trying to make him feel bad. And he's like, I've done all the research. They're like, well, we're doctors. He's like, I don't care what you are. You're just doing what you've been told to do.
That's right.
Not you. And so, like, I mean, for people out there, like, I mean, they're trying to say, oh, the babies need to get precautionary antibiotics. I mean, how much can that, you know, negatively affect a baby? You know, what is their reasoning for it? And yeah, I mean, what do you say to that?
Well, it depends on what the reason is for them recommending it. You know, one really, really common reason that women, at least in the United States, I know it's different for every country, and in the UK, I think it actually is quite different, but there's something called group B strep, which is a type of bacteria that lives in the vagina because it lives in the anus, and bugs that live in the anus tend to just go to the vagina. So when you have a baby, if you have this particular type of bacteria in the vagina, the baby can become colonized with it. And there is a small fraction of those babies. I'm going to bring up the data for you right now. There's a small fraction of those babies who can get sick. So 10 to 30% of women are colonized with group B streptococcus. And if you are colonized, we routinely screen in the United States. I don't think it's routine still in the UK, but we routinely screen around 36 weeks for this type of bacteria. There's a 50% chance of that woman who has this bacteria in her vagina or anus of passing it to the newborn during a vaginal birth. And if the baby is colonized, 1 to 2% are going to develop an early onset GBS disease, which can be catastrophic. It's about 2 to 3%, meaning 2 to 3 out of 100 term babies, meaning 37 weeks or more, can die from this. And if they're less than 33 weeks, up to 30%. But the problem with presenting this data is we've got a risk of 10 to 30% of women are colonized. Yeah. 50% of those women are going to pass it on to the baby. And then a percentage of those babies will actually develop any sort of disease.
Really, really minute.
That's a very small statistical likelihood. So when we present this, we say, you don't want your baby to die. Let's just do the antibiotics. Well, hold on. Are there any downsides to giving antibiotics systemically? It's an IV push of antibiotics throughout your labor. Is there any downside to giving these IV antibiotics to you, mom, or to the baby? Absolutely. We know that there are, but we overly emphasize that you know, roughly 1 in a couple hundred babies who are going to get really, really sick and die from this bacteria. So when it comes to informed consent, one thing that we're lacking here is we're not emphasizing the downsides of doing the antibiotics, so you can't make an informed decision.
Yeah.
So,
I mean,
yeah.
No, it's just like just carve it. This like we do it to everyone, even though a ridiculously small number of babies get this, and then not thinking about all the negative health benefits, repercussions of giving that baby antibiotics at that age.
That's right.
And wiping out their gut flora. I mean, it's like all the goodness that they've got inside them, this gets completely removed, and then you're playing catch up. And I've read some different studies that show how many illnesses, including even one round of antibiotics, let alone how many people have in their lifetime, how much it increases different rates of disease and mortality later on. And especially today where we're getting antibiotic resistance. I mean, even the WHO who are the most one of the most corrupt organisations in the world, when they come out and they have to admit something, it's like, well, they even said antibiotic. I put this like a couple of years ago when the whole pandemic nonsense happened.
Whatever.
I was like, I said, like, you don't worry about this, worry about antibiotic resistance, because they've even labelled
That's
it
right.
as by 2050, I want to say, maybe 2030 it was. Either way, it's going to kill more as many people as cancer every year. And
Wow.
I was like, this is the WHO saying that. And that's because we've got antibiotics in the feed for the cattle and the food, and now you're giving it to all these children or babies. I mean, they're already starting on the back foot. So, and then as well, you know, I think you're on the same page with this. Then they want to just slam a vitamin K shot in them and everything else that goes with it. I mean, so
we can talk about that if you want. Vitamin K is a great one. That is
I mean, you've got like 6 minutes, so I might have to be on another podcast.
Well, this will be real fast. So we give this shot of vitamin K into the foot of the baby moments after birth in order to reduce the likelihood of bleeding inside the brain or in the layers of the skull. Mm-hmm. So the risk without the vitamin K shot is 80. Let's look at high income countries. 9 in 100,000, Ryan.
Bloody hell.
If you give the shot, it goes lower than that. But what activity do we ever do in our life that has a risk of 9 in 100,000, and we take every precaution possible, even if there are detrimental consequences, to reduce that risk? Like, you have a greater likelihood of getting in a car accident anytime you're in your car than that. So this baby comes out, hasn't ever, seen his or her mother. We're inflicting pain moments after the baby is born, putting goop in the eyes, cleaning off all of the microbiota, and then wrapping the baby up, and we say we did a good job. We didn't do the vitamin K shot in our pregnancy. If you want an alternative, there are vitamin K oral drops, but still the risk is so low. We completely forewent everything in our second. And I think most people, if they knew that the statistics, they probably wouldn't want to inflict pain on their baby moments after the baby's born.
0.00009% chance.
Zero. Effectively
like,
zero.
And this vitamin K shot as well. It's like, I remember Paul saying, like, one of the first things on it, it says side effects: liver failure, kidney failure. So, oh, you want me to push this into my little baby? The same as anything else. That's without anything else. It's like vitamin K. I remember a great post. It was like, you say to what's in the vitamin K shot? Someone's like, I don't know, vitamins. It's like, no, not vitamins. Have a look. And it's like the same as all these things. My man, I know you've got to go in a minute, but I'll definitely want to get you back on, because there's lots more to talk about. But
we could do a part two.
Yeah, especially when you're talking about, you said about the program you're doing with Mike. It was one of my things. I was going to say, definitely would love to maybe do a collaboration, or maybe just like have an affiliate with you guys and putting it out there. But is there anything that you'd like to just for our first chat? I mean, I'll put it this way: if a mum wants to do a natural birth, the father will a natural birth, or if a mum's already given birth once and second time around she wants to do a natural birth, like, what would you say to them? Is it something they should be really worried about, or is it something that, when done properly, as you said before, it can be a really beautiful experience?
So you're looking for like just the bare minimum of what might help a person out on this journey. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, as in like being someone who's overseen how many babies have you?
Thousands. Yeah, I mean over 1,000. I don't even know. Yeah.
It's got to be probably tens of thousands. And so like some people that have done things your way, how many, as you said, like how it's very minute things the chance of going south, especially when they put in practice all of the things that you're doing. I mean, the question would be, have they got to be worried, or is it something that once they get into living the holistic lifestyle, doing the holism, as you say, is it something that it would just flow as nature intended?
I think that the most important, if I had a billboard I could publish on, I would say assume responsibility for every decision that you make, because when you become a parent, everything falls on you. You are responsible for everything that happens to this little kid. Now, granted, yes, mother culture and the media and everything has a role, but you are their parent. You have to put on your big boy pants or big girl pants, and you have to start acting like an adult. So you have to take your power back. You have to accept responsibility for all of the outcomes. But the good news is, when you assume responsibility for how you spend your time, your energy, your focus, your attention, your resources, you have control over the things that are controllable in pregnancy to the best of your ability. You have the control such that you can have a baby whenever, wherever, however you want, without, the minimizing the risks of complications, minimizing the risk that you need interventions or IVF or whatever else. We as a society need to start owning how we show up in the world. We need to take our power back and stop looking to the CDC, the WHO, mommy and daddy, our God figures, whatever, for the answers. You have it. You have to assume that when you're a parent. So it's great to start now.
Awesome. And that's, I think, that goes with all aspects of life, really. And it just
Absolutely.
comes here. Nathan, my man, it's been an absolute pleasure. Already looking forward to our second instalment. But thanks very much for coming on. And I know this is going to be a hit with our audience. But thanks for coming on.
My pleasure, Ryan. Take care.